I'll tell you a little bit of a story. Well, I'll tell you lots of a story. It's all a story. I was sitting there looking at this and thinking, well, I'm not young and I'm not really a professional. But I do have a message, and so I think that's the message that I want to share with you tonight. I think I was invited here because they thought if I can do it, anyone can do it. So that's the motivation. I'll tell you a little bit about me. You might understand the message I'm trying to give. So I got suspended from school when I was 14, not expelled, just suspended. The next day I got kicked out of home, so I needed somewhere to live, so I went on a fishing boat and went deep sea fishing. I did that for 6 or 7 years till I was about 19, and I did really well at it. Financially it was really successful, but then I was sick of smelling like fish and everything, and I wanted something. I thought there must be something more for me. And so I designed my own fashion label and called Zephyri, which means God of Idle Gossip, and started selling clothes at the markets in New Zealand, became really successful doing that. So I wanted to take my clothes to Camden Market in London and sell them as nuclear-free clothing. So I did that, and that was doing quite well too, and bringing back luxury cars and doing quite well doing that. And then some people in London said to me, have you heard of the Grateful Dead? And the reason I'm telling this story is because everything leads to something else, and I want to tell people to be open to what they can achieve. And so I'd never heard of the Grateful Dead, so this is before the internet too, so this is 30 years ago. So I looked up and did some study and found out who the Grateful Dead was, and did a clothing range and toured with the Grateful Dead around America. At the end of the tour, I went to Canada to meet up an old schoolmate with me, and he goes, oh, come to this coffee shop, they've got amazing donuts, and come and have a look. So we went down to this coffee shop, and it was like 11 o'clock at night, and we were drinking coffee and eating donuts, and going, wow, we should do this in New Zealand. No one's doing this in New Zealand. There's no coffee shops. Back then, if you wanted to go out at night, I know I've only got 10 minutes, I'll get straight to the point. Anyway, so if you wanted to go out at night, you had to go to a nightclub and wear certain clothes and everything, and we wanted something different where you could just go and talk and create and stuff. We can do over coffee, you can't do that over alcohol, because the conversation goes a little like that. Well, coffee's like, yeah, let's seize the world. So we thought, let's do this in New Zealand. So in 1988, we bought a coffee machine, sent it back to New Zealand, and then he came back to New Zealand, got on with his boat building stuff. I came back and was doing my clothing. The coffee machine arrived, and we thought, shit, we need to do something with the coffee machine. So we plumbed up to the garden hose and invited all our friends. And I said, we're going to open a coffee shop. And they were like, coffee shop? No one wants to go to a coffee shop. Anyway, so we're Wellington based, so we wanted to be in Cuba Street or Courtney Place. So we found an old place and we opened it on the middle of Cuba Street, where the first argument was he wanted to call it Havana, because it was in the middle of Cuba Street, and I wanted to call it Midnight Espresso because it was be late night coffee. Anyway, so we said, okay, we'll call it Havana Midnight Espresso. So we called it Havana Midnight Espresso. We opened the doors and absolutely pumped. It's still very busy now, 30 years later. And we opened a second cafe called Cafe Deluxe, Havana Cafe Deluxe. Anyway, we thought we wanted to roast coffee because there was no good coffee. So we started roasting our own coffee. And then we thought, there must be more. I want to go and find coffee. I want to go and find good coffee so we can roast the best coffee we can get. Because all of a sudden, a couple of people saw what we were doing, and at that point we were young. I think we were 22 I was 22 when I opened Midnight Espresso. Some older guys that now have got big coffee companies in New Zealand like Supreme and Allpress and that saw us and thought, what are these guys doing? So we had to keep one step ahead. So I thought, I'm going to go and find coffee. So I read that Jamaica had the best coffee in the world. So I said, right, I'm going to Jamaica. So I flew to Miami, got a plane down to Jamaica, got mugged in Jamaica straight away. Both times I've been to Jamaica, I've been mugged. Went up to the Blue Mountains in Jamaica, and I'm up in Jamaica looking at the coffee and that, and this coffee was way out of our price range and everything. And I was standing there saying to the guy, I said, what's that over there? He goes, man, that's Cuba, man, Cuba. I'm going to go to Cuba. Cuba's got coffee. If Jamaica's got the best coffee in the world and Cuba's right next door, I'm going to go and see what Cuba's got. So I came back to New Zealand, this is before the internet, wrote I think it was a telex or a fax to the Cuban government saying that I'm this person and I want to do that, I want to come. They'd never even heard of New Zealand back then. So anyway, so we went to the bank and said went to the National Bank and said we wanted a letter to go and see the Cuban government. They wrote us a letter, which you wouldn't get now, which says, we will honour anything these two young men decide to do on a National Bank letterhead. So we got the coffee we knew from Kenya and Bolivia and all these places, not Bolivia then, but Kenya and Colombia and Brazil, the coffee we already knew and we had, because we didn't want to get to Cuba and be like sort of overwhelmed by the romance of the rum and the cigars and the woman and the salsa. We didn't know about it then, but we didn't want to be, we wanted to be doing something factual, like looking at what we had instead of going. Anyway, so we jumped on the plane, and we had a briefcase full of coffee we knew. We arrived at Havana. We had the coffees confiscated from the government there. It was like arriving at a military airport back then in 1997. And we were waiting to meet this person who we'd been corresponding with called Kerry Fernandez. So this beautiful woman standing there saying, we're waiting to meet Kerry Fernandez. And she said, I'm Kerry Fernandez. And I'm going, this is a good start. We're off to a good start here. Anyway, we got that. We said we need to get the coffee. That person's taking our coffee. So we got the coffee, and we went back to the area. Who in this room's been to Cuba? Oh, we need to double that. So we went back to this room with the coffee, and we were sitting in the Cuba Exports lab, which is like you walk into like an old 50s building. There's Che Guevara on the wall and the slow ceiling fans. It was like something out of a black and white movie. And we were there, and we showed that we had all this coffee that the guys who had been working in coffee all their lives hadn't seen. So we showed them our coffee, and we sat around a cupping table, and we brought a small roaster with us, and we were roasting our coffee for them, and they were roasting their coffee. And we got to the cupping table, and we got to the point where there was the Cuban coffee, and we tasted it, and we went, oh my God, ooh la la. We went, bang! We had something that was amazing, and we knew we had something that was amazing. And back then, we probably used about 80 kilos of coffee a week, 100 kilos of coffee a week, and a container of coffee, which is a small amount, is 20,000 kilos, and it's the price of a house in New Zealand. So we had this letter from the bank, and we said, right, we're going to buy a container of coffee, thinking that if it didn't go good, we were going to have Cuban coffee for the rest of our lives. Anyway, the coffee arrived. I'll try and speed things up a bit now. The coffee was amazing. We brought the container of coffee in. It was amazing. People loved it. And there was an article they did back on national radio, the agricultural program, and what happens? They said, "Oh, we're going to go and interview." They interviewed me, and they said, "We're going to go and interview Cuba now." That must have been one of the trip or something. So they had the Cubans talking about us, about what they thought about us, and us talking about Cuba. And it was back in the day of a fax machine. On the Monday morning, I walked in, the fax paper was all the way across the factory floor, and we had liftoff. We knew we had something real. Anyway, to fast forward, we deal with about 30 countries, but the main ones that I personally deal with myself is Bolivia and Cuba, the ones I mainly go to, and now I've got a pet project in Tana where we're growing coffee in the Pacific. But so we had this amazing coffee, and we started bringing more coffee in. So we kept going with the Cubans. We use a container of coffee every 2 weeks now, so that shows the level of the business now. But what happened was, it was about the relationship. We built a relationship with the Cubans, and it was all on trust and personal and fun and stuff like that. But what happened was, the embargo that Edgardo's talking about is that would say we've sent the money, and then the money wouldn't go there, and they'd go, well, you haven't got the money, and they think we didn't have the money, but we had the money and we'd sent the money. So what's actually happening is the Americans are actually wrecking the relationship. And so that's another way that they can try and stop business. So we had so many problems because I've been dealing with business with Cuba now for 20 years, and it started to open up a little bit when Obama was in. We started to be free up. It started to go quite nicely. Now Trump's back in. We're like we're totally handcuffed by it just about. So it is difficult. But Cuba's got so much to offer. It's so much fun. It's the most amazing place to go and visit. My wife's French, and I took her there the first time. It must have been 15 years ago. And we got there, and she said to me, "You never told me the woman was this beautiful." I said, I did. She goes, "Obviously I wasn't listening." I thought, "Oh, this is going to go real bad." I have not been back to Cuba without her. Every time I go to Cuba, she comes. So I just went back with my whole family to celebrate doing 20. It's all about celebration. So the Cubans invited me back to celebrate 20 years. When my business was 20 years old, Fidel Castro's son, Fidel Jr., came to Havana, and we celebrated our business being 20 years old. So that's a celebration thing, showing you marking milestones and stuff. And then when we were 20 years doing business with Cuba, I took my whole family back, and we celebrated and danced and partied and everything. And they gave me another 20 years. So that now to 2037 or something it is now, but there's so much opportunity there, and I'm like, the reason I told you about me being left-handed, I'm left-handed and dyslexic and don't speak Spanish, but it's about going and connecting with the people. And what the message I'm trying to give is that why I told you the silly story about how I got here was, be open to things that you know, you might be going, oh, I'm going to go there and do this, I'm going to do a gap year, I'm going to study, I'm going to do that, but something might happen along the way that changes it, and you just got to grab it with both hands and do it. If I can do it, anyone can do it. But the Cubans, so I've just recently, so after 30 years of doing business, I realised I'd done coffee because it's something else I want to do. So I just recently sold my company to Lion, which is owned by Kirin. And so the Japanese love Cuban coffees. That was part of why they wanted my brand, because it had got so big. But I want to do something else, and I'm working with the Cubans now to do something else. And the Cubans are really wanting me to do it because of COVID. They're, you know, like a lot of countries, they're desperate for business. But the reason that I'm holding back a little bit, because I know it's going to be so successful, and I've just done 30 years, and I'm thinking, do I want to do something else? So I am going to do it. But I'm hoping it's not going to be too successful. So, well, yeah. Otherwise you got to work too hard. And again, another problem we had. So one of the problems we had also with Cuba was that they weren't certified organic, and they're not part of the fair trade movement, which is part of our ethos in our business. And the same thing with when we're dealing with Bolivia. There was farms in Bolivia that weren't in the fair trade cooperative. So we set up something together, our own, called Real Trade, which is transparent, which is something which is not everyone's clipping the ticket. It's like we're showing the farmers getting the money and the consumers getting the coffee. The farmers getting a good price. You're getting great coffee, and it's all transparent, because a lot of these you can't just take a Western model into these places in Central America or South America that have been doing business for a different way for hundreds of years. So you've got to look at each. I'm a person that goes in to look at a situation and go, learn what they do, this is what we've got to do their way, how can we help them? We've got to help. We can't help countries in South America or Central America by trying to put a Western system on them when they've already been doing something very different, a different way. There's so much opportunity out there. You just got to go and grab it with two hands. So I just wanted to get that message that the main message I'm trying to give is, don't get stuck in doing one thing. There's a whole lot of opportunities out there, and it will whack you in the face. Grab it with both hands. And one last thing. I'm a little bit chuffed to talk at the Yacht Squadron tonight, because when I'm not working, I'm sailing all around the world. I've sailed all over the world, and I nearly died 3 years ago on a yacht wreck in the middle of the Pacific in the middle of the night, and I got found by an Orion and saved. So it feels good to be here speaking and around all these yachts. Cheers.